And then the roll call was starting to take. And you would see the lights. And suddenly, it passes. And then there was this sigh through all of us. And then within seconds, just roaring applause. Doors were flying open. And I'm saying, get out, get out, get out. Let other people come in and see this while the board is still lit up.
25 years ago, Kathy McGinnis Meisner watched as Congress passed the historic Americans with Disabilities Act. For decades, individuals with disabilities fought for civil rights and the right to be recognized as part of the community. The fight for the passage of the ADA signaled a fundamental but yet uncompleted shift in the way Americans integrated persons with disabilities into the larger community. One of the biggest issues was transportation. As one of the leaders of the Maine Association of Handicapped Persons, McGinnis fought for accessible buses in Portland and South Portland. When the buses rolled, she and a friend were among the first to ride.
And so we arranged we would go out shopping. But it wasn't literally till I got to the store and I was shopping that I realized, my God, I can do this all the time now at a half hour, not even call, not a notice.
Some of those who experienced disabilities as children or young adults first encountered the differences in the schoolroom. Ross Dorr, who lost his sight as a child and is now an attorney, remembers the special education programs he was placed in as a child.
Multiple disabilities. There was an awful lot of acting out at, when you're in first grade or second grade, for the first time you're seeing other kids pass out. You're seeing kids have seizures. You're seeing kids fall over and hurt themselves. You're seeing blood, and you're seeing ambulances. You're not getting schoolwork done. None.
And school administrators were sometimes unwilling to face the challenges of accommodating students with disabilities. Penny Plourde, who was born with spinal bifida, grew up in the St. John Valley. Administrators there wanted to send tutors to Plourde's home, which would have left her isolated.
Because they were fearful that I would fall or I would injure another student, and the school was not accessible, had a series of steps, they really felt strongly that it was not an opportunity for me to go to high school. It would have been a burden for them. So they wanted to set up an arrangement where I had tutors come to my house, and my family wouldn't have anything to do with that.
Avery Olmsted, a library science professional, was born with cerebral palsy at a time when many such young children would be institutionalized. But his parents also resisted and placed him in a school with able-bodied children.
Once I was in the school, people realized that I wasn't an alien and didn't have three heads, and I moved differently than everybody else did. I might look physically different and move physically different. I had a lot of the same wants and needs and desires as the other kids. So I think once people realized that in a lot of ways that I was like my peers, I think people started to relax. When you're in elementary school, it's kind of cool because, kids would fight over who got to push me at recess, and I would get out of class to go to physical therapy, which I actually kind of liked because who doesn't like school break? I got a lot of attention for it. I got a lot of attention for having a disability, and most of it was positive. I was the Easter Seal poster child for 1980 and 81, so I got to do some traveling and got a lot of attention and stuff. And I will say I feel differently about the poster child thing now as an adult than I did then.
But for some, the problems were only delayed. Olmsted began seeing a different world as he entered junior high school.
It's when people start to go off into groups and, really find your identity. And I really didn't know what mine was. It stopped being cool to have a disability. And as the older I got, the more I realized, okay, it's going to be work.
In the 1980s and 1990s, as the disability rights movement gathered steam, there were no curb cuts, there were no buses that would accommodate wheelchairs, and there was no accommodation on bus lines for blind or deaf users. Tom Andrews headed up a new organization, the Maine Association of Handicapped Persons. Activist Kathy McGinnis joined forces with Andrews and one of the key issues was transportation.
We decided that if they chose to order them inaccessible, which they did, we would do massive protests. And of course, they were going to come online in January.
The Maine Association of Handicapped Persons took their fight to the courts, and in August of 1984, Superior Court Judge Donald Alexander ordered South Portland and Portland to provide accessible buses, and Maine became the first state in the nation to declare transportation a civil right.
Boy, the calls we got the day of that decision, from every state in the Union, from foreign countries, and operators trying to translate, and it was wonderful and crazy all at the same time.
In addition to basic civil rights, the disability rights movement worked to change the perception of persons with disabilities and foster acceptance in the workplace. Dennis Fitzgibbons is the director of Alpha One Independent Living Center.
The toughest one still is employment. The numbers of people who are employed are shockingly low. If the general population was at that rate, there'd be rioting in the streets, and yet we accept that for people with disabilities. And it's wrong, because people can work, and if they were encouraged to work instead of encouraged not to work, and encouraged to earn a living as opposed to going on to benefits.
Jeremy Libby uses a wheelchair and works as an independent living specialist for Alpha One. He sometimes found the job interview process discouraging when he applied for teaching jobs.
The type of discrimination I experienced was, it surprised me when it happened. It was after college, and I was applying for positions, teaching positions in the community, and I would go in for an interview, and just instantly I could see the shift in the interviewer's gaze, that they immediately signed out of that interview. They went through the process and said, "Thanks, have a nice day, we'll give you a call," but I could tell in the beginning that there was a shift in body language, there was a shift in demeanor that said, you don't have a chance.
The injury that left him partially paralyzed happened when he was a teen and left him with many questions about his own future.
No one, I think, especially no 15-year-old, wants to just sit home all day and do nothing. You have dreams for your future. You have aspirations. And actually achieving some of those was fantastic for me, and rejuvenating, and extremely positive experiences. Really learning that I actually had something of value that I could still contribute to the world. That was more motivating probably than anything else.
And some, like Chris Powers with hidden disabilities like Asperger's syndrome, struggle to hold on to employment.
For me, I think ultimately it took losing a job that I considered to probably be my dream job, that said, okay, I gotta get diagnosed. I gotta find out what's going on here. I just lost the job of a lifetime. I had this job in Boston working for a law firm. Great pay, great office, and I missed every social communication cue that you could possibly imagine. I missed it, and as a result, I lost the job.
Perception is a fundamental issue in how persons with disabilities are integrated into the world. Mike Rogers lost his sight to retinitis pigmentosa and is now a successful musician.
I can remember a time when we would be out and people would stare at you, I wouldn't be aware of it because I can't see, but Bev would tell me about, people look at you like you were some kind of a sideshow.
Penny Plourde ran for a legislative seat from her wheelchair, encountering voters outside their homes.
I couldn't do house-to-house canvassing as so many candidates do. I had to have an individual go up to the door, knock on the door, ask the homeowner to come out to visit with this candidate. Most of the time people did. Sometimes people said, in not so polite ways and in other ways, that they weren't interested in talking to a disabled person. about running for a state legislative seat, because how is that person going to do the job? Never once stopping to think that it wasn't about walking. It wasn't about riding, in a wheelchair. It was about using your mind to help create policy that would make a difference in this state.
And Ross Dorr battled unfair perceptions in order to get into law school.
I had been rejected 14 times by New England region law schools. I remember applying to a law school, and they rejected me. And I called the admissions office, and I asked them, I said, well, I have a high B average and a low A average for the most part in college, and I did that being blind, and I did that on the strength of just good old-fashioned hard work, because frankly it was darn hard to read the textbooks. So my A ought to be worth something. My B ought to be worth something. And I'll never forget the response I was given. The woman said, if we were to accept you with your blindness, we would have to generate a secondary class of student. We do not accept second-class students.
Sometimes persons with disabilities' perceptions of themselves evolved with experience. Kim Moody tells this story of when her first child was born.
I wore an artificial arm from the time I was a year and a half to the time I turned, or when I was 30, my first child was born. And I had always worn this prosthetic device and would not go out of the house without it. Never wore, it was very, I guess it's vanity, but never wore strapless anything because I never wanted the straps to show, as if people couldn't see this great big artificial arm, but it had something that it over 20 years of growing up with this thing. And then when I strapped it back on to leave the hospital with my brand new baby and went to pick him up out of the bassinet and realized, I don't want this thing on, because it was just not, it's a stainless steel hook. And so I took it off, put it in my bag, and really have never really worn it again since, except for biking or playing tennis or doing skiing.
And with the disability rights movement, persons with disabilities rejected some of the perceptions of the larger community.
The feeling was, I am no longer ever going to be considered less than. In fact, I think I might be better than you because I have a disability. I mean, there really was some of that going on, I think.
As the debate over the Americans with Disabilities Act progressed in the spring and summer of 1990, disability advocates began not only coalescing into a force that united various factions within the disability rights movement, but finding and developing their own voice. As the debate in the House proceeded, disability rights advocates successfully turned the emphasis from services to civil rights. There was stiff opposition in the Senate from North Carolina Senator Jesse Helms and a proposed amendment that removed protections for individuals with HIV/AIDS delayed passage for weeks. Moody was among the individuals who traveled to Washington during that period.
Because we were mad, that how could this be happening? How could the House pass this and the Senate not let it languish? There was just so much power and hope and dreams, and it was just an incredible time of the real heart of a movement.
Despite the opposition, the ADA cleared the Senate in what McGinnis remembers as an emotional moment.
The cheers were so deafening that the walls were just reverberating, and the whole room felt like it was vibrating and lifting up.
The ADA initiated changes both environmentally and attitudinally for persons with disabilities, but after 25 years, it is clear all of the objectives have not yet been met. Avery Olmsted.
I am very grateful that the ADA exists, and I'm grateful beyond words for the people that came before me that fought for this. I'm so grateful that they did that, and I'm very appreciative that it exists. That being said, I think there's a misconception in the non-disabled community that because the ADA exists for us, everything is great. now. And it's not. Even though there's laws in the books, that doesn't mean people follow them.
I definitely see the ADA as a success. I agree and concur with my colleagues who say we have nothing to celebrate next summer. 25 years and look how, we haven't come far at all. I understand that, but I definitely feel that the ADA has been a success. We have a lot more work to do, and we will do it. But boy, to think of the ADA as not a success is somehow putting ourselves down.
And there have been some surprises.
Interestingly, ADA when it started out was all about employment. And everyone thought they'd see a big boost in people getting jobs. That has never been the case, and it's actually turned out to be made much more progress from the Title III public accommodations point of view, where more and more businesses over time have become accessible.
But in the end, they had what they most wanted.
We had civil rights. They couldn't throw me out of the Faneuil Hall store they threw me out when I was a teenager because I might break something.
We will not excuse, we will not tolerate discrimination in America. I now lift my pen to sign this Americans with Disability Act and say, let the shameful wall of exclusion finally come tumbling down. God bless you all.